Good morning. Today we are speaking to Kasia from the Essex Restorative and Mediation Service about a case she worked on, a restorative justice case, with someone who had English as an additional language. So Kasia, could you tell us a bit more about this case?
Yeah, hi, good morning. So this particular case came to us a few years ago from one of the police officers as some form of early intervention case. And what happened is that it seems that there was a problem between two people that have been living next to each other. There seems to be there was absolutely no communication with each other whatsoever. They just refused to speak to one another and kept involving police in the dispute. The police were receiving a lot of reports from both participants. There was a lot of verbal abuse, minor criminal damage, and several false accusations that are being made. And then police were really concerned that this might lead to further escalation of the conflict, and it will most definitely end up in some serious or legal activity, and then leads to some further legal consequences for both participants. So one of the police officers investigating the case actually rang us and asked whether there's anything that we can do or anything that we can offer to help both participants to de-escalate the conflict and then kind of support them both to move forward or find some form of mutually agreed positive way forward for both of them involved. And then that's what we did. When we sent out two mediators to meet both participants to gain for a better understanding of what's been going on and what they would actually want to get out of the process, it turned out that one of the participants' language, the first language, is not English, and it became quite obvious that in order to move this case forward, we will need help from interpreting service to help us to communicate with the participant and to progress the case to a joint meeting.
Excellent. And then how did the case progress after that?
So what happened is that our mediators worked with interpreter as well as with both participants. And once we've prepared both participants to a joint meeting, they will both meet with the interpreter being present at the meeting as well.
Great. And what was the language in question?
I think that particular one was Lithuanian.
Lithuanian.
Yeah.
And could you tell us about the barriers that you faced when working with people with English as an additional language and also working with interpreters?
Yeah, so sometimes it's really difficult to actually find an interpreter who will be able like kind of on a go on any given assignment. And especially with restorative justice and mediation environments, sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes the dictionary, the wording, the pace of a meeting, and sometimes we do have to deal with a challenging behaviour at the scene as well. And that might kind of put some of the interpreters off, because they're more trying to actually interpret the language rather than actually be in sometimes very kind of what can be seen as a hostile environment. Yeah. So it's sometimes really to find it's quite difficult to find an interpreter to do so, but luckily, because we are embedded within Essex Police, we've got 24-hour access to interpreting services such as a Big Word or Language Line, and we use their services because they provide a kind of really a variety of interpreters. So it's not only an online, like a face-to-face interpreters that we can book. We can also use telephone interpreters as well as online video interpreters, which is really handy when it comes to working case in the RJ world when we've got participants whose English is not first language. But I think one of the challenges that you can face as a facilitator is to have an interpreter present who is also interpreting simultaneously. And it can be really distracting when you've got a situation during the joint meeting when you've got two participants on one side as you would in a mediation setting or restorative justice setting, and you've got mediators sitting just a little bit behind the participant who is kind of interpreting simultaneously, which is all the time. So there's no break between, there's no quiet time for them to interpret. So it can be really distracting when you're kind of shifted and when your attention is focused on two participants and you've got someone in the background keep interpreting and then using a different language. It can be very distracting. But I think once you kind of prepare yourself and kind of develop, like, you know, you'll shift your attention towards participants and kind of try to ignore their petiting, and it actually gets a lot quicker. But I think that's just something to be really mindful of.
Yes, I've heard a lot about the challenges of simultaneous interpreting and how it's very intense and a lot of hard work for the interpreter. But also there are benefits, such as the process taking a lot less longer than it would if traditional interpreting were used. So did you find that it was a much speedier process?
No, absolutely. It was almost as we would have a usual RJ meeting without interpreter. It was almost the same, so I would speed up. And then I know there are other types of interpreting available, such as, you know, you've got interpreter after an English speaking person has finished, then they're kind of queued to interpret. But it takes, as you've said, it takes a lot longer, and sometimes the weight of the words used can also be misplaced, and you kind of lose that momentum. So although it can be a bit more tricky for the actual facilitator, I think that's the best way forward to use the interpreting.
And did you face any challenges in terms of working with the participants themselves when they had English as an additional language?
So there was two kind of stages. In the preparation meetings, when we didn't have the other persons involved, it was quite straightforward because there was like a three-way conversations going on, whether that was online or through the telephone. So I think the interpreter then, they kind of used that they waited until one person will finish, then interpret again. But again, that was a bit longer process, but that's what we've agreed on to kind of get the best understanding of what's been going on and what is it that they actually want to get across to the other person.
That sounds really, really productive. And speaking of which, what was the outcome for the parties involved?
So in that particular case, having an interpreter present allowed us to facilitate a quite successful joint meeting between two participants. So both were actually given the opportunity to air the grievances, listen to what the other person was trying to say, and respond to actually what's been said. And I think that was also because they could finally communicate a little bit quicker with the help of interpreter, and then allow us to draft an outcome agreement, which enlisted future behaviour from both participants to help avoiding conflict from now on, really. And I guess it's worked because when we conducted a follow-up with both participants, there were no issues to be addressed. And because I'm a very curious person, when I met with the police officer randomly at one of the meetings I attended, I kind of we went out to conversation, and he mentioned that there was actually no further police reports made from either of the participants.
That's fantastic. It sounds like a really, really smooth process that led to a really good outcome for both parties.
Yeah.
So I would say that's a great example of how to do restorative justice successfully when either one or both parties has English as an additional language. So Kasia, thank you very much for speaking with us today, and wish you all the best with your work at the Essex Restorative and Mediation Service.
Excellent.
Thank you
Thank you so much for your time.